My name's Ned Bean, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways to tie a bucktail jig. This particular jig is a shad, looks like a spro jig. So anyway, when you're going to tie a bucktail, you really need to have a vision in mind as to what you want to put on it. This head is kind of a black powder coat with some purple metal flake or flakes in it. So what we're going to go for here is, this is on the dark side, so we're going to do a little bit of that. I'm going to try to get some extension with putting some longer feathers on back here, put a little bit of flash in there, and we'll try to walk you through the steps so that you can do this, but anybody can do this. So this is super glue, and before I put any thread on the shank, and yes, I am going to put stuff on the shank of the hook. I like to do that because it gives me a little bit more room to work with, and I can get the feathers to be a little bit longer. And I'm just going to lay this on here and go down the shank a little bit. And what this does is it gives the feather or bucktail, whatever I put on there, something to grab onto, and the super glue keeps the thread on there nice and tight. So since this is black, I think what I'm going to do is grab some of this, and we're going to pick a feather out here. And these are nice because they kind of, in the light, they seem to have a teal color. And one of the things that's fun to debate with other anglers is whether color makes any difference at all. And it's a great topic of discussion. I've got some, I like to use this because this marabou is also black, and it gives it a little volume, because remember, when this jig gets in the water, those feathers that seem bushy and have a lot of volume when you first tie it, that water is going to compress that, and your silhouette or your profile of your jig is going to be different in the water than it is when it's sitting on your fly jig. So I like to put some of that in there to give it a little volume. And now we got to rotate it. And also, this is just a personal preference. The feather curls like that. I like to put that concave side down on the shank. And now I think what I'm going to do is, I've got a couple of feathers there. Now I'm going to put on some marabou. One of the things you get used to is, if I put it right in this position, right, I'm going to drag it around. Well, so I'm going to start it off over here, more towards like 7 o'clock, and then when I pull tension on it, it'll come up in the lateral position where I want it. And wrap liberally. Thread is good. Thread is cheap. So, and I like to put things together with super glue, because this thing goes in and out of your jig bag or your surf bag or your tackle box, and if you grab it by the feathers, you don't want to have them come off in your hand. Okay, well, so we got some marabou on there. We got a little bit of nice long feathers that we took off of some pheasant somewhere. And I'm thinking now I've got to have a plan for going from here up to here. So I've achieved some length here. So, cutting off bucktail, that's an art in and of itself, and no two people do it the same. But I'm just going to go in here and grab a hunk of it, a nice big hunk of it, More bucktail is good, less bucktail is not good. You know, in diameter, probably maybe 5 millimeters. And then take this and put it in what I call a stacker. There's all sorts of stackers you can get, and the reason for a stacker is what it does is it takes all the hair you just cut off and it allows you to tamp it down so that all the ends get more or less in the same position, which makes it easier to tie, believe it or not. And some of the hairs get, you know, hung up, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll just push it down and do that and get it to settle a little bit more. Tapping it down in the stacker does a good job. You can get all sorts of stackers. There's some that are really expensive, but you know, I'd say if you're spending more than 10 or 15 bucks for a stacker, you're spending too much money. But you see how that comes out nice and level? And then what you do is you take it, and I'm going to hold this right here and watch what I'm going to do. All the short hairs, I'm not interested in those. I'm going to take them right out. And so the shortest hairs in theory should be shorter than from here to here, because I want the long ones. So now I'm going to take about this much of this bucktail. It's not an exact science. And I'm going to take that, I'm just going to set this over here. And you get a nice flat surface to work with. And I'm going to put this underneath. It was just the other night I was talking to a buddy, and we were talking about how fish tend to be light on the bottom and dark on the top sometimes. So we're going to have this be underneath as opposed on the top. And my super glue is working out pretty good. And I'm just going to take this and hit it with a little more super glue. This one I'm going to put up a little further north towards the jig head. And it's okay. And you see what happens there? Well, there's an easy way to fix that. You're probably wondering, like, what is he thinking by having that piece of bucktail stick out like that? Well, it won't be like that for very long, and you can manipulate it and push it and pull it. And we're just going to stick some super glue in there, and there, and then we're going to keep moving right along here. And I'm going to come up onto the collar of the jig and put this one. Get that wrapped on, and then I've got this one here, and I'm going to come up under the collar of the jig there. And I've got some marabou here, and I'm going to put that right there on the same area. And I'm going to come around on the other side with this one. This one's a little bit fuzzier, but that's okay. Once it gets in the water column and we're reeling it in, it'll lean right out and give you a nice profile for something that's slender. You use more super glue as you go along, as you get more wraps on your jig, simply because you're putting more thread and more material on there. There we go. Same thing here. Try to get a good hunk of it. And now I'm just going to go right here and hold it back there and pull out the short hairs. And I'm going to start building. This is kind of a concentric process of putting on bucktail. And I'm going to leave a little bit more up on the jig, and sometimes I'll spread it out. I'll take these nice little tweezers and I'll just go in and I'll spread the bucktail out to give it more area to cover. And the idea is you can put on as much bucktail as you want. It really depends on your own personal preference. You can put on every color in the rainbow. And I got to confess, on this particular design, kind of making it up as I go along and thinking about what I might like to add. I'm going to put this one right here. little bit. Hit it with a little super glue. Sinks right in, it's really good. And the nice thing is I like to put 2-ton epoxy on for my top coat. And by the time this is dry, there's no interaction chemically between this and the 2-ton. It holds up really well. I love purple, so we're going to put some purple bucktail on there. So this isn't hard to do, and it just is a matter of doing it enough times so that you figure out what works and you figure out what doesn't work. And before I forget, I also want to put some flash in there. So now I'm trying to fill so I can get not only a horizontal profile, but if a fish sees this from the top or the bottom, I'm going to have some breadth to this thing when it travels in the water column. Try to put tension on there. You don't want to pull so hard that you break your thread, but if you do break your thread, you might want to get stronger thread. Because you want tension on there for sure. You don't want to have this be loose. Well, now I'm going to put some flash on. And I'm going to put flash right there. So I've got, I usually only put one kind of flash on, and I don't think I'm going to go too crazy here, but there's the black flash. So I'm just going to gather it in the middle, like that, and pull it, like so. And then I'm going to put it, the black flash, in a lateral position, right there. What this does is if there's ambient light, the flash tends to capture that differently than, say, bucktail does. It also makes it look kind of cool. You might catch a few fishermen with this. I take some red flash. I think one of the reasons I do this is so that if I lose a jig, I know it's mine. I do the same thing with red. Then I'm going to clip it. This. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to clip it again. Just doubling it, that's all. This is pure superstition, but I like it. Put it right in the middle of that white patch. So now, my job is to finish this bad boy. So I want to wrap this thing. I want to keep tight tension on it. And I'm going to go up and down. And right there where the end of that bucktail is, I'm going to clamp that right down onto this jig. I'm just going to keep wrapping it. I'm building it up, and then I'm going to go backwards. And I'm holding the jig, and in my hand I'm holding tension on the bobbin, on the spool, because this kind of bobbin, you have to do that. It doesn't have a way to adjust the tension other than that. And you want to keep tension on this. So now I want to get back, and I know where the collar ends, but I'm going to wrap right into it. And let's see what we made. We made a nice little narrow profile bucktail that from stem to stern is that long. We've got about 8 inches there. We've got plenty of bucktail here, plenty of body here. We've got marabou underneath it in 2 places. And when this goes through the water, it's going to look kind of like a sand eel, like that. Remember that white piece that was hanging out low in the bottom? We tucked that right up in by wrapping back onto the collar. If you want to, when you finish this, I do 2 coats of 2-ton epoxy, and I do the entire thing. I'll put eye spots in here too, just the little adhesive jobs. I'll dip the whole thing or paint it on an epoxy. And you can take epoxy, if you're familiar with Popovich's surf candies, you can take epoxy and brush it back onto the bucktail as it's hardening and tighten it, or not. I'm not going to touch this one because that profile is exactly what I want. And when I put this in my bag, I don't want to crush these feathers. I got to lay it down or hang it up, and I don't want to be tossing stuff on top of it because I want these to stand up lengthwise in the profile when I fish it. And like I said, the red underneath means absolutely nothing other than I tied it. So that's it.